Hey everybody, Smart Silver Stacker here. Today's video I want to talk about the global economy, precious metals, the recent pullback that we've seen in gold and silver, and put that into some kind of a context for you, specifically relating to energy prices, crude oil, natural gas, electricity, because all of that is inextricably linked to the precious metals market in a number of ways, and really all commodities, because everything in modern industrialized society relies on energy, and so that is really the lifeblood of the economy. And the situation with energy moving forward is not looking good. So a lot to talk about in today's video. Bear with me, it's going to be interesting. There's quite a bit to cover, but let's get to it. So first off, energy prices in Germany and Europe across the board. Energy prices continue to skyrocket. The price of electricity in France and Italy and Germany is skyrocketing. Price of natural gas is skyrocketing as the flow of Russian gas through the Nord Stream 1 pipeline has been reduced significantly. And now, tomorrow on the 11th, the Nord Stream 1 pipeline is going to be shut down for routine maintenance. This usually takes about 10 days, so it's scheduled to open up on the 22nd, open back up and resume gas flows to Germany. But there's quite a bit of speculation that the pipeline may not be reopened. The Russians may just keep it shut down. And so this is creating quite a bit of anxiety in Germany and in Western Europe regarding energy prices. We're seeing the Germans begin to cut back on certain services. They're reducing heating in apartment blocks and homes. They're shutting down swimming pools, public swimming pools that require heating. They are turning down the intensity of streetlights. I mean, a lot of moves there at the moment to try to conserve energy. But I suspect it's not going to be enough, and we are going to continue to see skyrocketing energy prices there as the effects of these sanctions are felt and the Russian pushback against those sanctions, with the reduced flows of gas. And this is a situation that as we move into winter is going to become really critical. So the end of 2022, within the next 6 months, I think this energy situation in Europe is going to get much worse. And it's not just the fact that it's going to be getting cold and people's need for energy is going to be increasing. There are some other factors that are set to kick in regarding these sanctions and regarding the EU oil embargo that are set to kick in at the end of 2022, which is going to make a major impact. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But first off, a little bit about the Russian response to these sanctions. The war in Ukraine, it looks like the Russians are continuing to make ground there. And Vladimir Putin just made a statement that the Russians were just getting started with their military endeavors there in Ukraine. So it looks like they're kind of handily securing the eastern portion of the country, and now they may be turning their eyes westward. If you're counting on peace talks or a resolution to this conflict in the near future to solve this global energy crisis, this global economic crisis, I don't believe that is going to come to fruition. So, it is a fact that Russia is only using a fraction of its military at the moment in Ukraine, and with bellicose statements like this coming from Putin, looks like things there are going to continue to get worse. And just a couple days ago, Putin also made a comment regarding the ongoing sanctions, saying that there could be catastrophic consequences in the world energy market. And I believe what he was referring to there was this price cap scheme that the G7 announced back at the end of June, where they're going to attempt to control the price of Russian oil, control what third-party nations like India, China, all the BRICS countries, anybody who's continuing to import Russian crude oil, they're going to try to cap that price. But there's a lot more to that story than meets the eye at first glance, and a lot more to it than what's being reported in the mainstream media. So the official story regarding that G7 cap is that it's an attempt to curtail Russian oil revenue. However, what a lot of voices in the mainstream are not mentioning is, one, the mechanism by which this cap is meant to go into place, and also some details regarding the EU oil embargo that are set to kick in at the end of 2022. And what I'm referring to is the fact that the EU plans to stop insuring Russian oil vessels, the ships that carry the Russian crude oil, at the end of 2022. It's part of the embargo that is set to kick in. So it's already been passed, it's already enacted, it just hasn't been phased in yet, because this embargo, it's a phased thing. So it doesn't go into effect all at once. It's set to go in over the remaining course of 2022. And think about it, we're in July, we're getting pretty close to the end of the year, so the clock is ticking on this. But what that means the Europeans currently, British and European insurance firms, provide about 90% of the insurance for Russian oil shipping. So if at the end of 2022 that stops, it's going to provide a major impediment to the Russians exporting their crude oil to the rest of the world. Now, sure, some other insurance companies could step up, maybe Russian or Chinese or Indian insurance firms, but there's going to be some pain involved. It's not going to be an easy, controlled transition. If the Russians aren't able to sail their oil around the world, the price of oil is absolutely going to explode. Barclays predicts that this element of the embargo could drive crude oil prices north of $200 a barrel. And if that happens, we're in a lot of trouble. So this price cap scheme by the G7 is basically trying to give the Russians an out. They're saying, well, if you agree to sell the oil at a fixed price, maybe $60 a barrel, $70 a barrel, some cap underneath the going market spot price for oil, we will provide the insurance. But I think it's highly doubtful that the Russians are going to go along with this scheme. I mean, it's kind of like the G7 wants to have their cake and eat it too. They want to cap Russian revenues, but they also want to have the benefit of cheap Russian oil in the global economy. So, judging from Vladimir Putin's recent statements, I don't think that this plan is going to work. He doesn't seem like he's in the mood to cooperate. Why would he be? We're essentially involved in a proxy war against the Russians at this point, one that looks like it is going to escalate, unfortunately. But that's the situation we find ourselves in. So that's the real story about the G7 price cap and, Putin directly addressing that in those comments he made. But what does all of this have to do with gold and silver? Well, part of why gold and silver have been dropping so much in price has a lot to do with weakness in foreign currencies like the euro. And this energy crisis is weakening the euro. As a result, the US dollar index, because the US dollar index is a measure of the dollar's strength against foreign currencies, is moving way up. People are fleeing into the dollar. It's still the world reserve currency. It's still a perceived safe haven. So we see an inflow into the dollar, and that's driving the price of gold and silver when you price them in dollars down. If you look at the price of gold and silver in foreign currencies like the euro or the Japanese yen, or if you look at it in, say, the Turkish lira, for example, or the Argentine peso, they're doing really well. It's only in US dollar terms that they're having this major correction. I mean, they're dropping a little in those other currencies, but if you look at the year-over-year chart in foreign currencies, gold and silver are doing much better than they're doing in dollar terms. And eventually, these high energy prices, they're not going to stay relegated to Europe. This is just a little preview of what we have coming in the US. And it's very easy to look at the news and see that, the average German's electric bill is going up 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. They're paying these exorbitant prices, thousands of euros more than they would have paid last year, for example. It's easy to look at that and just kind of be detached from it. But when you see your own electric bill doubling, tripling, quadrupling, that's when this is going to start to get very, very real for those of us living in the US. And this US dollar strength that we're experiencing now, I don't think it's going to last forever. And we'll talk about that a little bit and why I think ultimately this US dollar strength is going to reverse in just a moment. But I think that we should be taking advantage of the fact that our fiat currency is strengthening relative to precious metals and take advantage of that and stack while we can at these low prices. And when these drops in the precious metals occur, I get a lot of trolls in the comments telling me, oh, silver's going to hit $11, silver's going to hit $15. I mean, I don't know, maybe. I guess the paper price could drop that low. But if it does, I will just be buying more because I'm not going all in precious metals. However, I am continuing to accumulate at these prices. The fall in the paper price of precious metals does not dissuade me at all from stacking and accumulating precious metals because ultimately I know what the long game is going to look like. And speaking of that long game, let's talk about what's going on in the US economy and how that's going to look moving forward. Well, we got the Fed, they're continuing to raise rates despite the fact that the economy is now heading into a recession. And I suspect that that recession will be confirmed on July 28th when we get the GDP numbers for quarter two. If that's a negative number, we are in recession. And, the Fed has only raised rates by 1.5%. They have talked a lot about fighting inflation and raising rates, but they have sure been dragging their feet on it. And I think what that means is that at the end of this year, when we see energy prices spike up, and I suspect that is going to be the case, Barclays is saying $200 if this embargo goes into effect and the cap on Russian oil doesn't work, Well, you also got JP Morgan. They're giving kind of a worst case scenario. They're saying that the oil price could go to $380 a barrel in the event that Russia tries to simply just cut their production, kind of to spite the West in view of their sanctions. Say, hey, well, if we can't make a profit from selling oil, we're going to stop producing it. They could cut their production by as much as 5 million barrels per day. That's what JP Morgan says. And if that happens, 380, $400 barrel, you're talking massive economic crises throughout the world. And if that happens, and we go into this massive recession, the Fed, maybe they'll raise interest rates at the next couple of FOMC meetings, but by the end of the year, they're only going to have interest rates up to maybe 2.5%, 3%, 4% at the max. And that means they're not going to have a lot of ammunition to fight this recession when it really kicks in. And fight it, I believe they will. Look around the world. Things are pretty peaceful here in the U.S. I know we still have these deep political divides that are simmering. That is a fact. But relative to other places around the world, things are very peaceful at the moment. But inflation is really beginning to create a lot of upset. I mean, look at Sri Lanka. Crowds just stormed the presidential palace. I wouldn't be surprised if we begin to see some kind of social unrest in Europe as these prices begin to spiral out of control. People can barely afford to put food on the table. In places like Libya, there is ongoing fighting. That's slashing their oil production and contributing to a number of problems. We had riots in Peru. There's other countries. I don't have a list in front of me, but I know social unrest right now is really picking up around the world. And I think it's only a matter of time until that spreads here to the US. Right now, sure, prices are up, but we are benefiting from that strengthening US dollar. And we have not felt the effects of inflation here the same way that they have felt them around the rest of the world. But when that happens, I don't believe there will be any political will for the Fed to continue to tighten their monetary policy, regardless of where inflation is at. If people can't afford the basic necessities of life, we've already seen in California the inflation relief checks that are being sent out to consumers. This is the mindset. Inflation's bad, well, stimulate more, send more money to relieve the inflation. But of course, that's only going to exacerbate the problem. And that mindset, I believe, will spread to the national level when things get bad enough. If there's rioting in the streets, they're going to send stimulus. And that, I think, will be the tipping point. When they start sending out stimulus checks at a national level to fight inflation, I think that is a clear signal that we are close to a total economic breakdown in this country. And we're a lot closer to that than a lot of people think. And $380 oil or even $200 oil, that might be enough to push us over the edge. And, when you see inflation spiking already, we've already got 8.6% inflation with no sign of a slowdown. Rates are at 1.5%. What's that supposed to do to control inflation? We start getting oil moving up in a very big way. Regardless of how bad the recession that we may be entering into, that is not going to be enough to fight inflation. And recessions are bad enough on their own, but recessions where everybody's losing their job and there's just not as many goods available in the economy and prices are way up, that's going to be really painful if inflation continues to move up as we enter into a recession. And that's exactly what's going to happen because the Fed is going to be forced to reverse policy. They're going to come under so much pressure from politicians. The Fed likes to act like it's not beholden to a political party, like they're independent. But that is just not the case. I mean, it's not how the system works. The president can appoint the chairman of the Federal Reserve, and if Jerome Powell doesn't play ball and do what the president wants, he's going to get replaced. That's how it's going to go. And they will put somebody in who will ease and who will temporarily, kick the can down the road a little further and relieve some of the economic pain we're at and some of the pain of voters and consumers. They'll send out some cash, but ultimately that is going to mean much, much, much higher inflation as we head into this economic downturn. And, right up until the last minute, they will never, ever concede that they were wrong with this easy monetary policy. I mean, the story is always going to be, well, we should have stimulated more. We didn't do enough. It's incredible how they can maintain this narrative in the face of everything that is happening. But expect that to be the case. Gold and silver, when that happens, when they start sending out those inflation relief stimulus checks at the national level, gold and silver are going to take off, I think. Which one's going to perform better? I don't know. My money's on silver. I think it's more scarce. I think it's more undervalued. But one thing's for sure, they're both going to do a lot better than fiat currencies. They're both going to do a lot better than Federal Reserve notes, and definitely better than digital receipts in a bank account somewhere for paper notes. That is going to be the most dangerous asset to be in, period. Stocks might do well, I don't know, but considering the amount of economic pain that we're going to be feeling, I feel better having an asset that I can hold in my hand and that I know can't be seized. The president can't sign an executive order and make this stuff go poof. Now, maybe we'll get a central bank digital currency at that point, and maybe this stuff will be illegal to own. I don't know. For me, it's not that much of a concern. Thankfully, this is actually all the metal I have left. It's kind of a sad story. I lost the rest of it in a boating accident recently. But, that just tells you why I like having my hands on physical metal. It's the place to be, I think, for the crisis that we have coming up, and paper is not going to weather the storm too well. You might want to have some cash on hand. I don't know, if we get a bank holiday or something like that, I expect in the early phases of some kind of economic turmoil, cash will still be accepted, and maybe people will be looking at this stuff funny, like, what are you talking about? Well, you're trying to pay me in silver? But ultimately, as this situation becomes much, much worse, and, I've always thought that the dollar's days were numbered and that we were on kind of precarious footing because of the national debt and the profligate spending and the record deficits. I mean, all that's been going on for a while, but I have never felt like an economic meltdown and an economic crisis was as close as it is right now. It always seemed like a bit of a long shot, like it would take some crazy black swan event to occur. But now I kind of feel like we're there. It's not even really technically a black swan. This stuff has evolved kind of slowly but surely, and the next step has always been kind of visible. By definition, a black swan is something you can't predict. And an oil crisis at this point, a massive energy crisis, a massive economic slowdown, and a Fed pivot, I view all of that stuff as being fairly predictable at this point. So, who knows what'll happen if we get a real black swan. Could happen, God knows. Maybe Russia will detonate a tactical nuke or something in Ukraine. I mean, there's all sorts of possibilities on the table right now. But one thing is for sure, precious metals are a time-tested way to weather economic crises, to weather inflation. There have been many, many, many economic breakdowns throughout the centuries, throughout the millennia, and gold and silver have never gone to zero. There have been a lot of fiat currencies which have gone to zero. In fact, every major fiat currency has at least been majorly devalued at some point. You can't tell me a fiat currency out there that has not been devalued over time. I mean, I challenge you to name one. And yet gold and silver, I mean, they go up and down. Sure, they're a commodity. Sometimes they find a big vein of silver somewhere. Sometimes they demonetize silver, in 1873. And the gold to silver ratio goes crazy, goes bananas. They vary up and down like any commodity, but they've never gone to zero, and they've always been a store of value throughout time that individuals can rely on. So that's why I'm still stacking. That's why I'm taking advantage of these lower prices. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, everybody. Thank you very much for watching. Smart Silver Stacker, out.